Normal looking photos that have a disturbing backstory. This is former NBA player Mark Jackson's basketball card. In the background are the Menendez brothers. They're sitting courtside shortly after killing their parents and just before getting arrested. The 17-year-old who took this photo told his family members that he planned to hike the stairway to heaven. He texted multiple pictures before his disappearance, and shortly after, the family noticed a man in this photo. While this photo may seem like an ordinary picture of footprints in the sand, they actually belong to a 4-year-old little girl who shortly after this photo was taken, drowned in the ocean. The two brothers in this photo are at Sequoia National Park. This photo was taken moments before they were both struck by lightning, and both shockingly survived. There was a tradition in Victorian England to take photos of dead people, often dressed in their best clothes, and pose as if they were taking a family portrait. If you look at this photo for long enough, you will notice something is a little off about one of the children. The man who took this photo of his wife scuba diving off the Australian coast also managed to take a photo of Tina Watson, who was drowned by her husband that day in 2003.
I killed and ate a man after seeing an ad on the internet looking for someone who was willing to be eaten alive. My name is Armin Maywes. I was born in Germany in 1961 and have been developing cannibalistic fantasies since childhood. This led to a terrible act in 2000. At that time, I published an advert on the internet looking for volunteers who were willing to be killed and eaten. A man named Bernd Brandes replied and came a month after mutual agreement. I killed him and began devouring his flesh. We filmed part of the crime. I ate his flesh for several months. In 2002, the police discovered my actions after an investigation and I was arrested for my crime. I was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for the murder of a man. In 2004, my case was reopened and my sentence increased. I was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Since then, I've been in prison and my story has gained worldwide notoriety. I'm A.
By the end of this video, you're not going to be able to look at this photo the same way. This photo looks completely innocent, a middle-aged man reading to a bunch of kids. But this man is Paul Schaefer, and he's the leader of one of the worst cults you've probably never heard of. Paul was a Nazi during World War II, and after the war, he fled to Chile to basically start his own prison camp. I talk about it more in this week's podcast episode, but he brought a bunch of other Germans to Chile under the guise of let's escape Germany. But once they were all there and he had them in the middle of nowhere, he started subjecting them to torture. And unfortunately, no one got it worse than the children in the camp. Upon arrival, kids were stripped from their parents, told they no longer had parents, and were beaten if they tried to talk to them. Pal also started a hospital in the area which was just a way for him to abduct local Chilean boys. If a young boy went in for a checkup, he would have the nurses sign adoption paperwork and he wouldn't return the boys to their families. And this is all because Powell was an abuser of the worst kind, and he did all this to create a society where he basically had unfettered access to young boys. And eventually, he turned his cult into a death camp. There are over 600 people who went missing at this camp, and most of them are local Chileans. Anyways, this whole story is so wild, and I encourage you to listen to the whole thing in this week's episode.
Normal looking photos that have a disturbing backstory. The girl in this photo was arrested for torturing and killing animals. She filmed herself doing it and even posted it online. She hanged her dogs by their collars, nailed them to walls, and even shot them with an airsoft gun. She would then cut them open and rip out their internal organs. This sweet looking little girl is Jeannie, also known as the Wild Child, who spent the first 13 years of her life chained to a chair, and this photo was taken moments after she'd just been rescued. This normal looking scenic painting features the ocean with the night sky. However, it was painted by Adolf Hitler, whose dream in life was to become an artist. However, he failed the entrance exam to art school and ultimately gave up. This photo of Richard Hickok and Perry Smith shows two murders after hearing that they'd been sentenced to death. They murdered a family of 4 and planned to rob them, but they found nothing worth stealing except for a mere $50. The girl on the left is wearing a wire. The girl on the right has no idea. Together they stabbed one of their friends to death, and the girl on the left confessed to the police and is now cooperating with them. Besides the pixelation, this looks like a couple getting married surrounded by their loved ones. However, all the children in this photo were horribly physically and mentally abused until a couple of them managed to escape.
In the midst of an intense video game session, John's room shook with a strange noise from downstairs. Alarmed, he silenced the TV and strained to listen, but nothing. Resuming the game, the sound returned even louder. Curiosity and fear set in, and he hurried downstairs to investigate. Opening the basement door, a chilling breeze brushed past him. In the dimly lit basement, he noticed the wide open window, though he distinctly remembered closing it. Unease gripped him, heightened by the sight of the slightly ajar closet door. Heart pounding, he debated whether to confront the unknown within. Summoning bravery, he reached for the doorknob when an eerie crackle echoed from within. Panic surged and he sprinted upstairs with trembling hands. He called 911. Rapidly, the police arrived. They swiftly combed the house, but all of a sudden, a gunshot sounded from the basement. They emerged, leading a disheveled man, his eyes wild, the officer's shaken voice saying. He aimed the gun at them upon opening the closet, narrowly missing his shot. Breathing a sigh of relief, John realized the terrifying truth. That could have been him the man was shooting at.
Have you heard about this supernatural phenomenon that sometimes happens to people in really bad car wrecks? So actually, I just heard a crazy story about this. A girl sent me an email about an accident that her dad was in, which I talk about on tonight's episode. So in 2001, he was driving to work on a military base when he got hit by a car. And it was bad. He was on a motorcycle, so his leg got lodged in the grill of the car that hit him. And as he's laying on the ground, all of a sudden, he sees this red pickup truck pull up, park so it's blocking traffic, and a guy gets out. And the guy looks at him and says, "Hey, it's your lucky day. I'm a paramedic and I just refilled my kit." The guy proceeds to clamp his arteries, which saves his life, but then when the real paramedics show up in the ambulance, he's gone. But then afterwards, he's like, "I want to thank the guy that saved my life." So he calls the fire department and they're like, "That wasn't one of our guys. We don't know who that was." So he kind of doesn't think much of it. But then years later, like 10 years later, he's in a barbershop with his daughter, who was the one that emailed me. And he overhears the guy getting his hair cut saying to the barber that he's a farmer and one day a piece of equipment rolled over him. And as he was laying in his field thinking he was going to die, a man in a red pickup truck pulled up next to him, gets out and says, "It's your lucky day. I'm a paramedic." And then again, when the actual paramedics show up, he's totally gone. I have more spooky stories I'm sharing on tonight's episode, but that one is crazy to me.
This Doctor Strange star is a convicted pedophile. So let's talk about this. Meet Zara Fithian. I think that's how you say her name. She is a martial artist who's been in a lot of movies, and she's well known in Hollywood for her ability to fight. I'm assuming that's one of the reasons why she was cast in the 2016 film Doctor Strange to star alongside Benedict Cumberbatch. And if you've seen the movie, you might recognize her. She played a sorceress in the film. But it's always the case with somebody that looks the most normal from the outside that there's something dark and twisted going on internally. And that definitely is what happened here with Zara. Just last year in 2022, Zara and her husband, along with 3 other men, were convicted of essaying a child repeatedly over a period of 3 years. In total, there were 14 sex offenses that she was convicted of, and the child in question that she was convicted of assaulting was only 13 years old. She was a 13-year-old girl. So the young girl, who's now an adult, told the court that between 2005 and 2008, she was abused about 20 times by the couple and these men, and that sometimes these encounters were videotaped and kept for private pleasure, if you know what I mean. They were producing CP with this girl. So the judge was actually pretty harsh with the couple and all of the people involved in this case, and stated that they were very, very disappointed that instead of taking any sort of accountability for their actions, they tried to lie their way out of this. But there was a lot of evidence in this case, a lot of stuff that I can't talk about here on TikTok. And yeah, this is such a disturbing story, and it makes me wonder how many other actors, actresses, people involved in filmmaking have done these things that we just don't know about yet.
One of my students stabbed me during class. My name is Agnes LaSalle, and this is my story. At the time of the incident, I am 53 years old, and I have been a Spanish teacher at the private St. Thomas de Aquin High School in St. Jean-de-Luz since 1997. I am in a relationship with a man named Stephen, whom I met on a dance floor nearly 14 years ago. We share a common passion for ballroom dancing. I also love painting. I am a passionate person in my work and dedicate a significant portion of my time to it, even during vacations. My husband wishes for me to enjoy life more. I adore my students, and they describe me as very nice and attentive. My life came to a sudden halt on February 22nd. Like every morning, I give my husband a hug as I get out of the car and head to school. At 9:45 a.m., while I am teaching a class of second-year students, one of my students stands up from his chair, blocks the entrance door, and stabs me without hesitation with a kitchen knife he took from his father's house the previous day. The students panic and flee in fear. The 16-year-old student remains stunned before entering a neighboring classroom where he is subdued by two teachers. He then declares, "I have ruined my life, it's all over." As for me, I am struck in the sternum and pass away shortly after an hour. The entire school and the entire country of France are deeply affected by what has happened. The student involved is taken into custody and mentions a small voice that urged him to commit this act. He was also under the care of a psychiatrist, but as teachers, we are not informed about the medical and psychological issues our students may be facing. He had also attempted suicide in October 2022 due to the harassment he was experiencing. He also mentions a dispute he had the previous day with a classmate and how he wanted to carry out the act in front of him. He also speaks of animosity towards me because of his poor performance in Spanish, the only subject where he doesn't excel, but he is described as kind by his peers. The initial psychological examinations reveal no mental disorders, and the student is deemed criminally responsible. The accused is currently in detention for premeditated murder.
I'm getting jiggy with a rifle. I'll pull the trigger with my eyes closed.
This TikToker known as Snow the Salt Queen and Yandere Freak killed her own friend, and she pretty much got away with it. So this is the real Snow the Salt Queen, Mary Ann Oliver Snow. And in January of 2021, she was involved in a tragic shooting. So before all of this went down, Snow the Salt Queen had a massive profile on TikTok with almost 2 million followers. She was constantly posting lip-syncing content, cosplay content, sort of similar to this.
Nobody likes me, everybody hates me, they want me to go eat some more.
Basically videos that were big on TikTok from 2020 to 2021, that kind of era. But this story took a dramatic twist when on January 16th, 2021, Mary, aka Snow the Salt Queen, and 7 of her friends were hosting a watch party for a Batman TV show inside of this house in Houston, Texas. So here's how this all allegedly went down. So at one point during the night, the whole group had been drinking Cokes with vodka. They had been making videos to post on social media, and Mary went out to the garage and retrieved a Glock handgun. Now, according to people that were there, Mary boasted that this gun was almost like the gun that the villain the Penguin has in the Batman movies. And she pretended to shoot one of her friends, pulled the trigger, and for some reason the trigger clicked and the gun didn't go off. But that's when 18-year-old Helen Rose Hastings allegedly, according to Mary, said, "Shoot me." So according to Mary, they were joking around, so she walked over to Helen, placed the pistol right up to her head, and pulled the trigger. Now, according to Mary, she thought that the gun was unloaded, but when she pulled the trigger with the gun up to Helen's forehead, it fired. Now, obviously, this bullet blew through Helen's forehead and she died in the hospital 2 days later. Obviously, Mary was then brought in by the authorities. Now, according to the people that were there who came rushing into the room after the shooting, they all said that this was completely unintentional, this was an accident, but the family of Helen actually thinks that there may have been some sort of evil motive behind the shooting. They've gone on the record and said that their daughter would never ask anybody to shoot her. She's even suggested that Mary and the other people that were there at the party may have had time to actually get their stories straight before calling the police, so they had one narrative that ran through the night. But regardless, after that party, a person was dead. And shortly afterwards, Snow the Salt Queen started posting to their social media again with a lot of tasteless images. This is actually one of the images that Mary posted after the murder, which shows bloody handprints on a wall behind her. So there's no real resolution in this case yet. Mary has been charged with manslaughter, but I couldn't find anything about a verdict or any developments in this case really since it made the headlines back in 2021. So I'll update you guys if something happens in this case.
See a picture that just gives you like full body chills. This photo was captured in 2007 and it seems like kind of a harmless picture, right? There's nothing that's very out of the ordinary. It's taken outside of an apartment window by a woman named Maria Leontinka in Czech Republic. A man was just outside of the apartment. He was screaming, he was shouting, and this woman took the picture because she was going to report it to the property manager, having no idea that something very dark just occurred in that building. Inside that apartment building in 209 was a family of 4. All all of which had been decapitated, and it's believed that man who was captured was responsible. Police are then able to connect the dots of another picture that was taken across town on the same exact day. It's believed to have been the same man, that he approached this group of teenagers and he was bragging about what he had just done, and they weren't sure if he was for real, if he was kidding, psychotic, so they took a picture of his face before he eventually ran. And this was the best shot they got. They even sketched the man, but they never found him, and his motive remained unknown.
There has been an absolutely horrific murder this week that was live streamed on Instagram. This case is extremely disturbing, so please be warned before watching. On Friday, 12,000 people watched a Bosnian bodybuilder kill his wife on Instagram Live. 35-year-old Nermin had been abusing his wife during their marriage, and the pair had a young child. On Friday morning, he took to Instagram Live to tell his followers that they could witness a live killing. Absolutely horrifically, he turns the camera to his ex, whose face is completely covered in blood and disfigured. He calls her a derogatory name and blames her for her own death because she reported him to police. Disturbingly, you can hear the child crying in the background. He then tells his followers that he's the child's father and his ex had hidden the toddler from him for over a week and reported him to police for DV. So, in my opinion, yes, she's taking steps to keep her and her child safe from you. After shooting his wife in the head on Instagram, he then goads his followers saying, "Someone come and save the child." A police chase then began and he went on a shooting rampage. He continued to film and tells his viewers that he's killed 2 other people who actually turned out to be an innocent man and his young son. He also wounded a police officer, another man and a woman while on the run. He ended up unaliving himself on the same day.
I can't see her doing something like that. She's super intelligent. I can't.
This is the moment Zach realized his wife, Ashley, was a secret murderer. Police found Taylor Wright, a friend of his wife, lying dead on his property. Police suspect Ashley was the murderer, but Zach refuses to believe it. Little did he know, he was about to get the shock of his life in the interrogation room.
Can you tell me how you came to know Taylor?
Through working PI cases.
Okay.
She'd come over to our house every now and then. She met my wife. They became friends.
Did you guys ever have a falling out or?
Never. From doing this job for so long, I would just pick up little lies from her. Stuff just didn't start seeming right. She would disappear for days. You couldn't get her on the phone. Greg and I would try to call her. You couldn't get her on the phone.
Taylor had been known to go missing for days at a time, but this time was different. She hadn't been seen for over a month before she was found. Early on, cops believed her disappearance was nothing out of the ordinary, but she'd left everything at home, and what little texts she sent to her friends were in language she wouldn't normally use.
I mean, I'm sure now you've read the news and everything.
Yeah.
You kind of know the date that we're talking about. Have you had a chance to go back and pinpoint where you were on the 8th of September?
I can't remember, but I'm trying to do the very best I can so I can tell y'all the best I can. I went to the bank yesterday to pull my statement. I know I ate lunch at the seafood place at 9 Mile in Pine Forest. I ate there, and I remember eating by myself, and I remember Ash not being able to make it because she was tied up with work.
Taylor was last seen on the 8th of September, so Zach attempts to recount what he was doing that day. Given that he used his debit card to purchase food in the area, it's likely that his story is true. What's interesting, though, is that he mentioned he was out on his own as his wife was busy with work. It seems that he fully believes this to be the truth. And while he knows his wife has been questioned about the murder, he doesn't know that she's currently the #1 suspect. The cops aren't trying to learn more about the case. They're trying to determine if Zach had a hand in the murder, or at the very least, turn him against his own wife.
Do you know anything about...
Audrey used the remaining time to pack enough air for the 3.5-minute dive. A kiss from Pepin, and Audrey took her final breath.
I was keeping pretty careful track of the time, as I always do. I suppose I was 20 meters from the dive boat in a little skiff.
I'm holding the line, and Pepin was doing the same also from the water, because we get to feel the vibration coming from the sled, just going under and brushing against the cable. So we have a way to determine more or less what's going on. When I look at Pepin, it was as if something was just not right. But on the other hand, nothing was wrong.
doy la señal de que está en 80 metros. Ella pasó por delante de mí, que iba bien, perfecto.
I had the feeling something was not right before she hit the bottom. It takes decades of experience, but if you look at a line, you can see how it's oscillating in the water column. This can be caused by current, but it also be caused by the tension on the line and the fluctuating tension on the line. And it just didn't look quite right.
A minute and a half into the dive, to tell Audrey she was nearing the 170-meter mark, Pascal clanged his pipes.
I saw Audrey arriving like usual, you know, fast.
At 1 minute and 42 seconds, Audrey's sled reached the bottom of the line.
And then the first bad surprise, when she finished to open this tank, which was supposed to fill the lead bag, nothing happened.
Imagine getting married only to be decapitated by your husband 3 months later. 21-year-old couple Jared and Angie got married in October 2022. Around 4 p.m. on the 11th of January, police were called to their home in Texas. Police made a grim discovery in the pair's bathroom after finding, quote, what appeared to be the head of the victim to be in the shower, end quote. Angie's body was discovered on the floor near the bed in a pool of blood with multiple stab wounds to her back. It was actually Jared's poor parents that initially made this discovery after entering the home. They then obviously alerted police to what they found. Jared was arrested and has confessed to killing his wife with a kitchen knife. Jared was actually captured on CCTV, casually stealing a bottle of beer from Angie's workplace just minutes after it's believed that he killed her. Angie's friends have reported to police that the couple's relationship was toxic and Jared was very controlling. Jared's bond is currently set at $500,000.
At age 18, Michelle Martingo was the all-American sweetheart. 6 days before Christmas, she went to the mall in her hometown of Cedar Rapids in Iowa. And Michelle had parked her car in a dark corner in the car park. She did not really think twice about it and just went in to do her shopping. Now actually, while she was at the mall, she bumped into her ex-boyfriend named Andy. Now the pair did exchange pleasantries, then Michelle just went on with her business. When the mall was about to close, Michelle headed towards her car. She turned on the engine to warm up the car, and when she did that, she didn't lock her doors. At that very moment, someone opened her car and brutally stabbed her 29 times. Now no money was stolen and she was not SA'd. At about 4 a.m. that evening, her body was discovered. Her family were rightfully devastated and an investigation into her case was launched. Now many in the town immediately suspected her ex-boyfriend Andy. However, Andy's mother had provided him an alibi. She said he had made it back home by the time Michelle was attacked. However, many witnesses still thought he was somewhat involved. At the funeral, he had been acting hysterical, almost getting into the coffin with Michelle. The investigation would continue and Andy would never be arrested. In fact, he would end up moving away and joining the Navy. And sadly, Michelle's case would go cold. However, in 2005, a detective named Doug Larson, who just so happened to have gone to school with Michelle, decided to reopen the case. And what he uncovered is truly chilling. Uploading part 2 now.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
I made the decision that I wasn't going to let these two captors win. I wasn't going to let them take my life from me. I would do everything I possibly could to survive.
And I'll never forget the day, 9 months later, we were walking up State Street in Salt Lake City.
Yes, could you tell me, is this like how, if I think I see that Emmanuel they're looking for?
And all of a sudden, there were police cars pulling up around us, and these police officers were jumping out of the car. And this was not the first time that we'd been approached by police officers.
When I got out of my car, I asked them what their names were. They gave me Peter Marshall, Juliet Marshall, and Augustine Marshall.
And they came over and surrounded us and started asking questions. And my two captors, they kept giving answers.
This girl standing off to the side really stood out to me because she had this disguise on. It just didn't fit.
She was wearing a wig, a gray-haired wig, claiming that she was 17 or 18. She was the only one out of 3 wearing some sort of disguise.
Marcy, she immediately clamped her hand down onto my leg, and in my 14-year-old mind, I just knew that if I did anything or said anything, that I would be killed, and then they'd go after my family.
She then said something like, I think you know who I think I am, but I'm not that person.
And the officer started asking me questions, and there had been a whole backstory prepared by my 2 captors that they told me I should say if I was ever questioned. And so I started giving those answers because they were standing right next to me.
So at one point I could see her t-shirt actually moving. Her heart was pounding very fast in her chest.
Her eyes welled up with tears. You could tell she wanted just to physically say it.
Let's talk about what happened to 16-year-old Ashley Lovelace. Ashley was born on November 7th of 2002 and was born in Pennsylvania. She also had 4 siblings that grew up with her in Las Vegas. While living in Las Vegas, she was greatly influenced by the showbiz world, and she wanted to pursue something along the lines of fashion and singing. She ended up joining various social media platforms, for example, like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. And she would post fashion-related Instagram posts, and that really helped her gain followers. With having a presence online comes a lot of love, but also some hate. A guy named Tyler Edmonds was one person who cyberbullied her the most. Someone had asked Tyler why he decided to cyberbully Ashley, and he said he just did it because he was bored. Unfortunately, Ashley took her life on January 21st of 2019. Her mom ended up making her a GoFundMe page to honor Ashley's legacy, but also bring awareness to cyberbullying. Ashley's family states that no one is to blame for her death. Still to this day, Tyler gets a lot of criticism about how he has no remorse, and he just literally does not care, and he stated that he is glad that she did what she did, and he can't wait to bully more people. Rest in peace to this beautiful soul. Let's talk about what happened with the Watts family. This is 37-year-old Christopher Lee Watts, and this is 34-year-old Shannon Catherine Watts. At the time, they were living in Colorado, and they also had 2 daughters. One of them was named Cece and Bella. Also at the time, Shannon was pregnant with a boy. On Monday, August 13th of 2018, around 1:48 a.m., Shannon was returning from a work trip to Arizona, and her friend/colleague was actually going to give her a ride back home. Since Shannon was gone for the weekend, Chris took care of the girls. Shannon and her daughters were reported missing by the friend/colleague because Shannon had missed her OBGYN appointment, and she wasn't returning any of her friends' text messages. Once Shannon had missed a business meeting, her friend/colleague had went to her house around 12:10 p.m. and she was just knocking on the door, and eventually there was no answer, so that is when she calls Shannon's husband Chris and lets him know, but he's at work at the time, and she is also contacting the police as well. Around 1:40 p.m., the police department heads over to the Watts house, and they are going to do a welfare check. And Chris, he lets them go in the house and check anything that they want. They notice that Shannon's purse with her keys are there, as well as the children's medication. Her phone was later located in between the couch cushions. Also, Shannon's car was still in the garage with the car seats of the children. Chris was doing interviews with local news stations, just pleading for his wife and children to come home. On August 15th of 2018, Chris Watts was arrested. According to a security camera in the interview room, Chris had failed the polygraph test, and he subsequently had confessed to killing his wife. Chris had stated that he was having an affair and he wanted to separate from his wife, and his wife was not taking it well at all, and that's when she decided to strangle the kids, so then he decided to strangle his wife. Chris then takes the bodies to a remote oil storage site which was leased by his employer. His daughter's bodies were found in a crude oil storage tanks. Shannon was buried in a shallow grave nearby. On August 21st, Chris was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. On November 6th, Chris had pleaded guilty, but Shannon's family did not want him to get the death sentence. On November 19th, he was sentenced to 5 life sentences. On September 30th of 2020, Netflix actually came out with a documentary regarding this whole family case. There is probably more information than what I am giving you, so I would recommend go see it. If it's still on there, I'm not sure if it's on there since it came out in 2020, but it might be. So I would definitely go check that out so you can get some more information.